So as Dr. Bowlby said, I'm Allyson Marsh. I am a youth leader and a youth ministry student at the Olympic School of Theology, and I am the co-founder of the youth ministry at the church that I go to, which is Deepwater Church. And it's really weird for me to be talking about this stuff because usually I actually study the religious movement, so I'm kind of switching hats and talking about my role with ministry instead. And with my master's, I actually studied, I directed research on youth engagement and looked extensively actually at Sam Reamer's work, so it's really cool to be here. So I go to a church that is very different than what people expect. Studying religion, you often hear about the decline of religious affiliation and the decline in church attendance. And I actually go to a church that has grown from about 25 people to about 350 people in 6 years. Primarily university-aged students. So when semester ends in the spring, we drop quite low, and then we always tend to grow again in the fall. And it's actually an evangelical church. It's a Wesleyan denomination. So I'm a little bit of a, I guess, paradox here. I'm a young, female, evangelical, pro-choice, gay-affirming Christian. But in this church that I go to, we have grown so extensively that there has been a need for a youth ministry. Our children's ministry currently has about 40 children, and they're all growing, obviously. About 3 years ago, myself and a person who was working on staff at the time, recognized that there was nothing set up for these children once they graduate through the Sunday school system at grade 6. So we decided to get together and do a test run for about 6 weeks to see if we could even pull this off. Because neither of us had any actual youth ministry experience, but we were very eager. And now we've been running for 3 years. We've not grown to the ways that you would see some youth ministries. We have about 14 kids that we would consider members. There are youth ministries happening in this city, particularly with like Shiloh Church, the Rock Church, that you actually get 100 kids, which is, I think, when you think about youth ministry and what kids are putting their time into, you don't think about church groups, but it's quite surprising. And we have a really interesting situation where we actually have children who have come on their own. As a youth, when I was 10, 11, 12, all of my friends and I were in church. That was just, I'm from Newfoundland. I was still at the time when there was a Catholic and a Protestant school board. We had religion in our lives. Our parents went to church, we went to church. That is not what you see anymore. So we're seeing kids who have never been to church, who kind of maybe know what the Bible is, but it's quite a different experience. So we're meeting children at lots of different places, which is really not what my experience was as a youth. So it's really, one of the problems I think that I would say is facing youth ministry at this point is that we're getting children who have never gone to church before, who are maybe invited by a friend or have, their friend has mentioned something and they're kind of interested. And in the same youth group, we also have missionaries' children. So I guess one of the issues, I was trying to think of, the changing face of religion in Atlantic Canada. And in this youth group, one of the things we have to deal with is the fact that things that you talk about in church and in your home life now are very different than even what I would have spoken about. We have a lot of kids coming to us talking about, homosexuality, talking about drug use, talking about suicide and self-injury. And it's really interesting how youth ministers and youth leaders are also kind of playing a role as counselors and friends, and you have to fill all these different holes. And it becomes a problem when you're in a denomination that has certain beliefs that don't necessarily line up with society. So if you're in a church that doesn't affirm gay marriage, and you have a child that's coming to you who says, I'm a girl and I like girls, how do we deal with this? It's not something even my ministers have necessarily had a lot of experience with until recently. So it's definitely one thing that I would say, the way in which society now informs the church instead of the church informing society. We've definitely seen that kind of split, and where you have to kind of look outside of the Bible and say, yeah, maybe Leviticus says something, and maybe our church believes that, but we also have to instill this belief in the children that they are, children of God, and they're valuable, and making sure that, I guess I would say my main goal at youth ministry is not necessarily to have them be perfect followers of Jesus, but to not mess them up. I have a lot of friends who went through church, went through youth groups, and feel so screwed up. They feel like the church gave them so many messages about who they are and what they should believe, and it's been really damaging. And you're seeing young people not go to church because they think that they hate gay people. They think that there's no place for women. They think it's stuffy and old. And my goal more than anything is to make sure that these kids have like a really safe space where they can ask these questions. And maybe I don't give them the perfect Bible answer, but I make them understand that there's someone out there who is a Christian, who cares a lot about them, who thinks they're okay exactly as they are. So I don't tell my 16-year-old girl who might be bisexual, who's questioning her sexuality, that the Bible tells her that that's wrong and she should, repent or whatever people say these days. I just tell her, you know what, God loves you anyways, and that's okay. And I don't tell people, modesty culture in the evangelical world is a big issue. So modesty culture would say, women can't wear certain things because it would cause a man to lust. And yes, I would tell my girls, who are primarily made up of girls, we do have some guys as well, that they should respect their bodies and themselves, and they should think about what they're wearing. But I'm not going to make someone feel like if they're wearing a short skirt that they are doing something wrong. So then when they're 25 years old and someone says something to them, they are like, well, my church told me I was basically a slut anyways, which is things that I have heard from people who are friends of mine who are my age. So I think my main kind of takeaway is that we're dealing with a lot of different issues than youth ministry has in the past. We're getting, especially in the congregation, more so than in the youth ministry, we're getting people from all sorts. So we'll have people at church on a Sunday morning who are hungover, and you know what? That's okay. We want to meet people where they're at. I worked in camp ministry as well as youth ministry, so I was involved with a large summer camp, that's a Christian summer camp, where I've had to do suicide intervention, where I've had to tell parents about the self-harm issues with their children, where I've had to talk to kids about eating disorders. So there's definitely a role there outside of the Christian ministry, but it all comes together as well. To be a person that's showing love and grace and just showing that caring side, and not being about the rules and how some people have that kind of preconceived notion of what Christianity is these days. I have 2 minutes. Okay. And I guess that I would say our youth ministry is also, we've gone through a lot of struggle to figure out how to meet these children where they're at. When you do have people who are coming and have never heard the Lord's Prayer, who have never opened a Bible, and you have people who could recite half the Bible, they know the Bible better than I do. So it's been a real struggle to figure out how to lead youth ministry over the past 3 years. We've gone through about 4 different curriculums trying to figure out how we can do this. Where kids know so much and kids who know so little, and how to engage them both at the same time. So that's been quite a struggle, but we've changed a lot. The music we do at our youth ministry is certainly not something you would expect. We have a full band. We take the style that our church does, which is worship music, So no traditional hymns, very like rock and roll type music, which we have a lot of discussion, and more so than trying to teach at them now, we've realized that we have to start almost from the beginning and figure out every semester with every new kid, we have to analyze what they know, what they don't know, and how we can kind of go from there. It's been a challenge, but in the past 3 years, it's also been amazing to see so many children have their lives changed. I get burnout, as all my leaders do. At the end of the semester, we work very hard, and we're competing with, gymnastics and dance and football and soccer, and some nights there'll be one kid showing up because they all have other things in their schedule. So trying to figure out how to make it a priority when kids are so, they're so scheduled already. And it tires you out when you work, planning for 10 or 12 hours a week to have one kid show up. And so it's definitely a challenge and a learning experience. And it's I just want to leave you with the idea that while Christianity in Canada is definitely changing, there are all these pockets that people don't even know about, that I didn't know about until a few years ago, that are growing, and what you expect on a Sunday morning might actually be quite different than what is really happening. Absolutely. One experience that I had when I worked at the summer camp especially was that there was a lot of children who were coming. The camp actually ranged from like 6 years old to 18 years old, so depending. But we offered a leadership course called Core Group, where they learn kind of leadership, biblical leadership, and how to help out. And there was a girl who had come through, started going to camp just because it was in her neighborhood, really attached to it. Her parents were somewhat into, very kind of, I go to church at Christmas and Easter, and she became quite involved and really had basically a conversion at camp, and then wanted to be more and more involved. And her parents definitely weren't happy about it, and there was a lot of, pushback. She wanted to read the Bible at home, her parents didn't support that, really kind of questioning and being really negative about it. I've seen that happen quite a bit, and hearing stories from campers who would say, I come here because I can't do this at home, my parents don't support me in this, so here is where I come, and this is my religious place for a week, and I get my fill, and I kind of go back home and fight against that resistance. So you're getting it from parents, and you're also getting it, they also have a lot of trouble with their peer groups as well, they make that change. We haven't seen it quite as much in our youth group setting. I think with the one girl in particular who came kind of with her cousin, her mom and her dad aren't necessarily really supportive and don't really understand. So I think they're more question it than push back. I think they support it, in a kind of blase way where they're like, yeah, you can come and we'll take you there, but that's kind of it. So it's definitely creating, these kind of inner conflicts, even in my own life. I see that having, kind of converted to an evangelical denomination, seeing that in my young 20s and seeing my family not understand that. You see it quite a bit in the kind of peer group that I'm in as well, when people started, 18, 19, 20, not having that at home and coming into it. And there's just so much misunderstanding and fear as well, because, people think, oh, what is this? This is evangelical, or, even the camp I worked at was Baptist, but if you're expressing faith in a more, open way, then instead of going to church on Sunday and kind of keeping your head down and maybe reading your Bible at home, parents, friends, everyone is kind of just what is going on? Have you joined a cult? What are you doing? So it's been interesting to kind of see that and help navigate that as much as I can, but at the same time, you can't really step in and tell parents if they're right or they're wrong. So it's definitely been a bit of a battle. There's not really, I go to a church that is like young, white Halifax kids mostly, so there's not a lot of diversity in my church, which is unfortunate, although you will see, because of the rise of Christianity, evangelical Christianity, because of missionary work that has happened through Africa and areas like that, you will see people coming when they come to Dal or SMU or anywhere like that. We are pretty well known around campuses, so you will see people from lots of different areas come. I know we've had a lot of Asian students that have come to Dal or SMU for TESOL that come to our church as well. So I guess it would more be what brings us together as being young Christians than anything else. Something, actually, the reason I went to this church in the first place is because I was a young Christian. I was going to an Anglican church. I grew up Anglican, and it did nothing for me. I was the youngest person by probably 20 years. I was, told I couldn't fold the cloth on the communion table because I wasn't part of the Anglican Women's League or whatever it was. And I was like, why am I here? This is doing nothing for me. I'm here because I was Anglican and my grandmother was Anglican and I was told, this guy was confirmed and all that stuff, so I went there and it was nothing, it was empty and I felt nothing. So I went to Deepwater because I knew that there was this young church that people actually cared and talked about things, and mostly you'll see people that are coming because of that. A lot of people coming from other religious denominations that are just, there's no place for them, and if you look, you'll see that the decline is happening, in the United Church, in the Catholic Church, less so in the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has done some really great stuff to help with their kind of young adult ministry. The Anglican Church, all these churches that are just kind of like not focused for years on youth because they have, they're not the ones paying the bills in the church and they're not the ones who have always been there. So you have this church that everyone who's kind of fed up found a place and a home, and it's been kind of cool that way. We have a fairly good relationship. We've just kind of officially become a Wesleyan church in the last year. We were always kind of Wesleyan affiliated. Our pastor came from a Wesleyan church and we were a Wesleyan church plant. There's a whole thing that you have to go through to become an official church. But in our kind of startup time, we definitely, we had a relationship with a church called Pax North, which is in the North End. It has some denomination with it, but I'm not even quite sure what it is. And our leaders, like my pastor and the pastor of Shiloh University Church and any other kind of evangelical ones in the community, they're all quite good friends. Even we've kind of reached out to other groups as well, like the Catholic Church, we have some relationship with. There hasn't been a lot of strain. I think within kind of the evangelical culture, everyone kind of knows everyone, so it's worked to our advantage, and you'll have crossover. So Shiloh University Church would be the other kind of big church for young people, which happens on a Friday night. So you'll get people that go to Shiloh on Friday night and then come to Deepwater Sunday morning, or now we have a Saturday night service as well. So you'll have people that kind of go everywhere, and we're just happy to support each other and to help each other as we can, instead of kind of closing those doors and being our own group. And I think it also depends on, if there were kind of more evangelical churches that were a bit more, I guess, biblically, there are certain churches that we wouldn't probably partnership that are a bit more fundamentalist, but you don't find that quite as much here in Halifax. So the relationship is quite good. I think if you were to go into other communities where you see, that fundamentalist and then evangelical and then kind of mainline, you might see more of that kind of the kind of gates being done.